The Hog's Tie is brought to you by TicketClub.com, your one-stop shop for live events nationwide. Whether you're looking for game, theater, or live performance tickets, don't sweat it. TicketClub.com has you covered. So make sure you're going there for all your live entertainment needs, and make sure you're clicking over to them from the banner at the top of thehogstie.com.
By fans, for fans, the Hog Style. And now, here's your host, Sean Conti.
All right. Here we go in 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Hog's Tie, DC's unofficial leading source for all things Redskins and the NFL. Got a nice show for you today. My name's Sean Conti. I got Steve Thomas, my intrepid co-host, with me, and Chris Larry of It's Just Business and the Hogstie.com fame. Chris, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on with us today. How you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm happy to be on the mothership.
Yeah, welcome aboard. So we got plenty to talk about today, that's for sure. How you guys been in the last week before we jump into the nitty-gritty?
Oh, just super peachy and keen, man. It's I love the free agency period because it's one of the more exciting, periods of the offseason, I think. Because if you couldn't put it into kind of big buckets, you got the start of free agency, then you have the draft, and then you have nothing. For about
the
4 or 5
zone.
weeks, yeah, and then those are the weeks when we're talking like hashtag content kind of
Game
shows.
of Thrones, yeah.
Yeah. When we've done Game of Thrones, it's been during the June dead period. But I love this time of year. It was a little kind of a slow week, Redskins wise, unfortunately, but that could be good depending on how you look at it.
Yeah, or it could be a calm before the storm situation.
Yeah.
Well, let's get on into it then. So we had, I guess, first things first, most importantly, we had some free agent movement this past week, some comings,
Yes,
some
sir.
goings. Let's talk about those, probably starting with the biggest one, which would be the addition of Orlando Scandrick to the defense there from the Cowboys. How are you guys feeling about this acquisition? I'll tell you, I like it.
Yeah, I think it's great. Yes, he was a Cowboy. No, I don't particularly care. To me, once they take the Cowboy uniform off, they put the Redskins uniform on, I'm all for it. But in terms of what Scandrick brings...
Amen, brother.
Yeah, I mean, look, Scandrick, the Cowboy secondary has been a weak spot on that team for years. That's not exactly news. But Orlando Scandrick did have some good years, with Dallas. He had good years. He's not making a lot of money here. We just got his real contract numbers in this morning, actually.
Yeah, let's definitely hear that.
Yeah. There's a little bit of controversy and dispute over his exact numbers with the various sources that I follow, but the cap hit is in the range of $2.6 million, depending on who you ask, for 2018, and then his cap hit next year is $1 million. What is undisputed is that he only has $1 million guarantee, which is a signing bonus. He's got a lot of incentives, like $2 million in incentives. The contract total value is in the range of $7 million. Again, there's a tiny bit of dispute about that, but think about $7 million. And then I already said cap it, $2.6 million cap it. And look, he can be cut, And so if he really, really stinks, he's not going to be a Redskin. But I think what he brings is the infamous veteran presence on a unit that could use it. Since we had Brashad Breeland and the other guy, Kendall Fuller, leave, so they needed a guy like Scandrick. He's not coming in here. They're not paying him a fortune. He's not coming in here to be the number one corner. He's coming in here to be depth, and I think he can do that real nicely. So I like it.
Yeah, he's taking over the hybrid position that was formerly held by Will Blackman and D'Angelo Hall. So
Makes sense. So how do you think he compares to those guys? Do you think this is an upgrade over a guy like Breeland? Is it a downgrade? Is it a lateral move? Just a stopgap, measure? Is it going to be basically the same thing?
I think it's kind of. I think he's almost equal to Breeland. Honestly,
I don't know.
Well,
Really?
Breeland's had his ups and downs. Let's not pretend that Breeland was great, okay? Breeland
Yeah, but he
is
doesn't have a broken back and 4 years of age,
Yeah, okay. I mean, fair enough. But, it's not like Scandrick's an old man here. He's only 31. He's not 34. I don't think we're losing too much, put it that way, by going from Breeland. to Scandrick. And also remember here, it's not really a fair comparison because the starter is going to either be Fabian Moreau or Quentin Dunbar, depending on who kind of wins it out. And so the idea of saying, well, oh my God, Scandrick isn't Breland, is I don't think that's really fair because Scandrick rather is going to be the nickel guy. He's going to be the backup. He may be the slot guy. So I think if you look at it in that context, in particular, I think it's okay. And look, I mean, Scandrick was a starter, okay? Scandrick was a starter since 2013.
Yeah, I was going to say, he's been the starter. He's sort of been a fixture on their secondary.
Yeah, and the Cowboys secondary hasn't been any
poor
good.
secondary.
It's a poor secondary, no doubt. The Cowboys secondary's been poor, but he's a starter, and so we're going to take a starter on a poor secondary and move him into kind of a backup, slot guy role. I'm okay with it.
All things being equal, I'd rather have Breland 10 days out of 10 days.
Would you rather have Breland at a huge contract?
No, as I said, I'm saying as players go, I'd rather have one. If you factor in the other contextual things, I think it's a bit of a wash, and Breland was going anyway. I'll repeat it. I think this is Will Blackman, and if he is the level of experienced journeyman, sometime starter that Will Blackman was for, 3 seasons, and can bring some of the diversity and switching positions in the secondary, then that's a valuable role.
I think it's not a bad comparison. Will Blackman, it's kind of the same role, yeah, for sure.
So you said he's 31, Steve. How long was he with Dallas, do you know?
Yeah. Oh, I just closed the
He was
window.
drafted by them, right?
He was drafted with them. He was drafted in 2008.
Okay, so he's been there his whole career.
Yeah, and he didn't start for the first 5 years of his career. He only started 2013 through 2017. He's been fairly healthy. Yes, he had injuries.
How much do you
last
think
year.
he's fallen off from over the last three or so years since sort of the peak of his playing ability?
If he hadn't fallen off, he'd be a Cowboy.
Yeah, right. So how bad, I guess, with the question? Because here's what I would say. Thinking about the situation in general, it's just like the Cowboys kept this guy for 8 years, 8 seasons. That's more than we would keep anyone. A guy like Breland who had his playing deficiencies for sure. He was still a good, solid player. Like Chris was saying, you'll take him, 9 out of 10 days just based off of his playing ability. We can't commit to people. So I don't hate the acquisition in terms of who he is, but it's just a shame that, we're picking up somebody once they're done with their big commitment to another team. We can't commit to our own homegrown young talent. That's the impression that I get from it. It's a fine acquisition in terms of where he fits on the team. But it's just kind of depressing, man, to let people constantly go and picking up guys once they're over the hill, with teams that committed to them.
It comes down to money, though. It's the thing.
Yeah.
They don't want to pay Breland $20 million.
There's no way he commands a $20 million contract. You think he really commands that?
He did command a $20 million contract until his foot problem came up.
Yeah, but you think that was actually going to go through $20 million?
Yeah, they would have
Breland?
signed him if it just wasn't a rumor; it was a signed contract. So yeah, I think it definitely would have gone through.
$20 million is.
He's a starter. He's a starter. I mean, I hear you about keeping free agents or keeping our own homegrown talent.
Developing your own talent.
Yeah, I hear you, and I think it's a legitimate concern. But the simple fact of the matter is, they just weren't going to pay that much for Bashaud Breland.
The problem with. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No,
Steve.
go ahead. It's all right. I'm just babbling.
The problem with Breland is not his play on the field. Every player's got, strengths and weaknesses or whatever. And yes, he's not Darryl Green, but he's still a starter in this league and probably a little bit above average one. The problem is he's got a 10-cent head. So, and the fact that he couldn't handle bringing talent onto a team in the same position that you happen to need 2 of was just ridiculous. And the fact that he couldn't emotionally recover from that.
He got pretty pouty.
Yeah, was the damaged goods parts of Breland. And was
It's a great point.
So that to me was the death knell for him in Washington. I don't think it had much to do with his play on the field, but it just, like many things with the Skins, it got to this point where there was too much bitterness and rancor to look backwards.
I think
Makes complete sense.
Yeah, I think Breland's been a little whiny. He's been a little, he's a little touchy. He's a little sensitive. He's been like that since the day he got here. So I think that's a fair point. It did look like he got his shorts twisted up a little bit when they brought in Josh Norman. I get it. By the way, I'd be remiss.
They were twisted before that. Remember when he was fighting Andre Roberts in training camp?
Yeah, exactly. It's ridiculous. It's just absurd. It's ridiculous. And by the way, I'd be remiss in mentioning. I said Scandrick has been mainly healthy. I mean, with the exception of 2015 when he tore his ACL. Okay.
Ouch.
Yeah. I mean, we had that, but other than he missed the entire year there. But beyond that, as far as I know, that's the biggest injury he had. He does have a drug suspension back in 2014.
That's the other thing I was going to ask, though. So we can move on from Scandrick if you guys are ready, but
sure.
I just wanted to say, are we sure that he has the cleanest personality? I know we're kind of dogging on Breedland a little bit, but Scandrick has had some scandals to his name as well, hasn't he?
Well, this is why the contract fits the risk.
Yeah.
Scandrick can be cut. He can be cut today. Did I read off his dead money numbers? I mean, he's only got $1 million.
Yeah, it was only $1 million hit, right?
Yeah, $1 million, and that's pre-June 1. And so if they wanted to split it up to post-June 1, it'd only be a $500,000 dead cap hit. So, they would save money. So if he really acts up, he's gone.
Here, let's do this. Grade it on an A to F scale, and then we'll move on from Scandrick. How do you like this acquisition, A to F?
I give it a B. But in context, in big picture, looking at everything, I give it a solid B. I think it'll be okay.
What about you, Chris?
I think it's an honest C, which I think is just basically what Steve's saying with maybe a little less grade inflation.
Awesome. He's a veteran with some experience for cheap. I like it for that reason. I'm going to give it a B minus.
Okay.
Give it a solid B minus.
See, because we're going to be right. One of the three of our grades is going to be right.
Yeah. Somebody should have said F to cover that when he, tears his.
I'm assuming that Alex would have said F. So let's just attribute an F to Alex, and let's just assume Jamal loves it. So Jamal will give him an A. Alex will give him an F. So we were completely covered in all bases.
Completely covered. I like it. All right.
Way to not take any position whatsoever.
Right. Okay, so we had some other movement as well. Who do you guys want to talk about next? We have Mr. Terrell Pryor getting himself a contract. Andre Roberts got a contract, which is worth mentioning. Grant, Junior Gallette, obviously. Maybe Gallette's the next
Yeah,
story.
I think the great unwashed out there are more upset about Gallette than anybody. That was probably an incredibly negative way to refer to our listeners, wasn't it? Sorry about that.
Let them eat cake, Steve.
It's one of these things when you're doing live shows, sometimes stuff comes out of your mouth that you didn't really mean. I didn't really mean
cold,
that.
Man.
I heard that as soon as it was coming out of my mouth, I thought I better not say it too late. It was one of those things.
We'll redact it.
Yeah, we'll bleep it out later. I don't think you guys are the great unwashed. I just think some of you aren't very smart, that's all. No, but anyway, the news this week is that the Redskins, this is per John Keim, who is, one of the lead beat writers you should be paying attention to out there. The news was that the Redskins had an offer on the table for Gallette that was fairly small, and that they have now pulled that offer for one reason or another. If that is true, then it appears as though, unless that is just a negotiating tactic, which it could be, Gallette may not be back. So that's the news. Thoughts?
Well, it's kind of hard to gin up a lot of emotion for me about this. I mean, this was a guy that had a hell of a hard time just finding the field here at all. We kind of talked about his impact with the team more hypothetically than we ever did, in a real sense. So surprised, not at all. Disappointed. I have a hard time ginning up much emotion about this. At this point in his career with us, I'm probably ready to just cut ties with it.
Fair enough. What do you think, Chris?
That's a pretty good take. I can't disagree too heavily. I think, to me, it's a larger issue of it's hard to constantly be on the other side of these, right? So the Scandrick move isn't, it'd be a lot more positive about it if it was on the second page of a list of positive moves and news with the Skins, not like the lead story. Same thing here. It does seem like we can debate the relative value of a lot of these players that are walking out the door. One thing I know is we don't have a lot of talent walking in the door, and we seem to be growing holes, not closing them, or at least growing competition at them. So I think when I start to aggregate them, I get nervous. Am I gonna weep in my pillow over Junior Gallette here? No, not necessarily. But add it up, I start to get worried.
Can we talk a little bit of X's and O's here for just a minute? Is that allowed?
Please.
Okay. Here's the thing about Junior Gallette. Junior Gallette is known as a speed rusher. He's known as a pass rushing specialist. That's why he was very effective in New Orleans, was because he's a pass rushing specialist. He's we've had guys look at him in training camp Robbie Duncan said it to us when he was still on our show. Gallette was the only guy that could beat Trent Williams on even a semi-regular basis in training camp. The reason is he's so fast. Pre-Achilles, I realize. But to me, when he was out there last year, I didn't see him losing too much of a step. But here's the X's and O's thing about it for me. Ryan Kerrigan is always going to be on the defensive left side, okay? For a variety of reasons, that's where he's always played. They don't flip him around. He's got the hearing thing, in his left ear. So he's pretty much always going to be on the left side. He's facing the right tackle. Preston Smith is the other starter. Preston Smith is built a lot like Ryan Kerrigan from a body type standpoint. He's bigger, muscular. He doesn't have the quickness. Preston Smith has been very effective. Now, I'm not trying to denigrate Preston Smith here, but Preston Smith's gig is not speed rusher. So I think when you have one of the bigger, stronger left tackles, Preston Smith may be a good option to rotate in on the right side because he's got speed. His thing is speed coming around the edge. And if you have a slower, more powerful left tackle, maybe he's the guy. I think this team needs speed off the edge. They need team speed generally. They brought in Paul Richardson on offense as team speed, but they need speed on defense. Zach Brown is back. He's one element of it. I think one of the areas that the team really needs improvement speed-wise is in the linebacking core. Outside linebacking core. They don't have them. So I think if they don't bring Gallette back, they need to draft someone who is known as a speed rusher just to bring that element in, who can supplement Preston Smith given in the right situation. That's why that's what I think we lose with Preston or Junior Gallette leaving.
Does it give you pause at all to still be talking about edge rushers, needing edge rushers after the last, 10, 15 years of Redskins history?
We're always talking about edge rushers.
And I know it's a critical, everyone needs it, it's critical, so I get that to a point. But man, we can't seem to get good guys on this team.
They have Kerrigan. Kerrigan's,
That's one hit in like 15 years.
Although on the other hand, though, the Redskins haven't been too bad in sacks. Really, I think if you really want, if you give me truth serum, what I'd tell you is I think what would help more is to be able to get pressure up the middle.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what they really need. Interior pressure is what they've really, really lacked. Maybe a healthy Jonathan Allen will help with that. Go ahead, Chris.
I think he will definitely help with that, but I don't think he's the whole story at all. I could not agree with you more. And if you actually want to develop younger speed rushers or take flyers on mid-late career guys, you can actually afford to do that if you have pressure up the middle. And that's been the problem.
That's a good point. So
you can actually, you can get specialists and mix and match and play X's and O's on the edge in a 3-4 if you have two things. You can have consistent pressure up the middle, and that you can actually stop any running back in the league. And so it doesn't matter, even at the talent level, even your Ryan Kerrigans of the world only make limited impact if you're not solving that problem on a regular basis. That's been proven. We actually rush from the edge pretty well in the last 4 to 5 years.
Yeah, that's my
not
point.
The issue.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. Yes, I think we need a speed rusher off the edge. But what pressure up the middle does, again, if you want to talk X's and O's, how a smart quarterback beats pressure off the edge is to climb what they call climbing the pocket. You move up in the pocket, and then the tackle, the left and right tackles can sort of guide those speed rushers just low, south enough, if you will, to allow the quarterback to step up. Like Tom Brady does that brilliantly. Tom Brady's a big Frankenstein statue, right? He was slow when he was a rookie, but he climbs the pocket brilliantly. And so how to defeat that is you get a big stud defensive tackle right in the middle to keep those guys from climbing the pocket, then they're stuck. That's when you really get a lot of pressure and when you can really affect the passing game. So I think we really need that. And one of the reasons why, we're going to talk draft later, but one of the reasons I'm not super high on Vita Vea from Washington is exactly that reason. I don't know if he's a great run stuffer, and I don't misunderstand. If he's drafted, I'm fine with it. But I think one of his weaknesses is I don't know if he's going to be able to get that type of pressure in passing situations. So that's what I think if you want to talk X's and O's.
I mean, just remember how many times Brian Arakpo was one fingernail away from the shoulder of the quarterback, which is exactly what you're talking about. And you could always ride him around the edge, and he'd be a hand away.
It's a game of inches.
That's a big hand in the difference between a downfield catch or a sack.
Yeah, and Brian Arakpo is one of those guys that we let go and who has succeeded. When we let him go, Brian Arakpo might have been the guy they should have kept.
Which is weird because his pectoral is made out of super glue at this point. But
take a guess as how many games he started for Tennessee.
It's going to be crazy and make me really pissed off, like all of them, right?
He's not missed. He's not missed.
I knew you were
going to
say that.
Years.
Go to hell, Steve. Go to hell.
And on top of that, you know how many sacks he's had?
I don't want to.
He's probably averaged 8 to 10 a year, right?
Yeah, he's had 24.5 sacks in 3 years. 7 sacks, 10.5, 7 sacks.
So more than dependable.
Sounds productive.
More than solid. Jesus.
Yeah.
And he's a 3-down linebacker, too.
Yeah, and he was a Pro Bowler in 2016.
Yeah. Dan Snyder cursed a gypsy woman or something and brought, this curse on us.
He cursed the gypsy woman.
So I can dig my Brian Arakpo jersey out of my closet with pride?
Yeah, that's right. Now you can finally wear it without humiliation.
That's kind of a big FU to Redskins fans, perhaps, but feel free to do it.
All right, well, let's move on.
You're wearing the jersey of the guy who left.
That's everybody. It's hard to buy a Redskins jersey these days, Steve. You never know how long they're going to last. Everyone who got burned by that Griffin jersey fiasco, never going to buy another one for another 10 years.
There's a reason I don't buy jerseys. By the way, I mean, we didn't mention that Terrell Pryor.
No, we got a couple
Jets.
more. We have Grant and Roberts, right?
Okay, go ahead. Lead us, take us through it.
Well, let's talk about Pryor first because I think that's probably a good one. It's not necessarily Redskins news directly, but it's interesting to note. So he's not the only former Redskin to go to the Jets, but he has signed to the Jets on a very conditional 1-year deal, right, Steve?
Yeah. I mean, look, I was never. I always thought Terrell Pryor had more potential than he showed when he was.
You
here,
and I were high on him
like that.
when that rumor came down.
Yeah, physically he hasn't. Physically, if he's healthy, he can be a quality receiver. He just needs practice. He's very inexperienced. It doesn't surprise me that the Jets would take a flyer on somebody like Terrell Pryor. They're not going to. They improved somewhat last year, but it's not like this is going to be a Super Bowl
They're doing what we did
team.
with
It's not like they have
right?
a quarterback.
They're basically doing what we did.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like this dude is, not like they have Joe Montana back there throwing passes to him either. So, I mean, good luck to Terrell Pryor. I think most fans out there are probably happy to see him go. I thought it was a failed experiment that had a shot at going really, really well.
It's a gamble.
Like that.
It's a gamble. You take a star from Cleveland. Yeah. It's a gamble. It's a gamble to see how he's going to do. I think he has more potential, but could not find his groove with this team. What do you think, Chris? Do we whiff on him completely, or?
No, because we didn't overpay, right? So as long as you don't hurt yourself, you can take those kind of flyers. So, and one thing I can commend the front office is, and maybe this is probably because this is Bruce Allen's specialty, is we do seem to get veterans and mid-tier guys on more team-friendly contracts on a regular basis, which then makes the low-risk part of that fine. Not going to beat them up for taking the flyer last year. But what I will point out is we say goodbye to 2017's overhyped machine player that's going to be the difference this year, which he definitely wore the mantle of last year. So be curious to see who it is in 2018, but that'll be his Redskins legacy.
It just shows the power of social media in 2018. 2017. It really
people
does.
want hope, Steve.
Because
that's what it is.
Yeah, I mean the reason why he was overhyped was because of all his Instagram posts of watching him do crazy catch drills and insane workouts, and my guess is that probably all NFL players do stuff like that. We just don't know it because we're a bunch of yutzes behind a microphone, so we don't really know that. And I'm sure, if you go to, I don't know, Julio Jones, he's probably doing similar things, but we just happened to see it with Terrell Pryor, and so we all got horribly excited about it, and then saw this 4.3 speed thing, and it just went insane. But Chris had it exactly right. I mean, it was a low risk proposition financially, so yeah,
it is what it is.
They paid him $6 million, didn't work. It is what it is. Good luck to him.
His problem with social media is he was RG3 level corny. I think that's the
sure?
difference. Like,
That's a bold statement.
Like,
Is that even possible?
well, he's close. He was batting in his ballpark because, you can be good at social media and do the same stuff, but when you come off just so cheesy, the slogans and it's just he was bad at social media from his voice and brand perspective.
It's so interesting because I don't follow any of these guys on social media. I'm just so
You don't
completely
even follow us
uninterested.
on social media.
That's not true. I follow the Hogsty. I know that because I logged into my Twitter for the first time in like 6 months
really?
the other day. I still have the egg icon.
Because you yell at me every once in a while over something nutty I put out on our Twitter.
It's true. It's true.
Once in a while.
I don't know. I just don't follow these. I don't want to buy into the hype of Terrell Pryor. I'd just rather see what he does on the field. Forget his.
Well, the
social
other
media.
thing that the Jets have done is, the Apostle Andre Roberts has signed a 1-year contract with him.
My favorite, Andre Roberts.
Andre
Yes.
Roberts, 30 years old. He signed we don't know he's 30 years old already. So he's going to be there. So, the New York Jets are the home for wayward Redskins, I think, right now. I can't imagine the duo of Terrell Pryor and Andre Roberts is going to get them to Super Bowl 53.
in the CFL? I forget what he's been doing or what he's been up to. That sounds familiar. Like a punt return or something?
Is he a Raven?
Situation?
He's been around, yeah.
Hold on. Who would be?
So I was not prepared to talk about Andre Roberts' background.
Okay, so he's been around.
He was with Atlanta in 2017 and Detroit in 2018. Or 2016, rather. Yeah, he played in 16 games, started none, 4 targets, 1 reception in 2017. He did a little better in 2016 with the Lions, 25 targets, 14 receptions. So productive he has not been.
Hey, man, make that money.
Who else, then?
Yeah, get those greenbacks.
Did we talk about Grant already? Did we talk about Ryan Grant?
Well, Ryan Grant, at last blush, Ryan Grant had lost his $29 million, 3-year, $29 million. Was it 3 or 5 years? His 5-year, $29 million contract with the Ravens because of the ankle injury that was debatable. What I concluded was that he had a real ankle injury. Whether or not it was worthy of canceling his contract, who knows? We'd have to see the medical records. The bottom line is the Ravens terminated the contract for medical reasons. He signed with the Colts this week, last week rather, since we've done the last show. But he only got a 1-year, $5 million deal with the Colts. So that means the man lost the possibility, at least, of
I feel incredibly
$24 million.
We've never talked with Chris
so
about
you have to feel
Grant.
for him.
Where do you
I
fall
feel bad
on the
for him.
Grant issue? Do you like him? Is he a sad loss for the team? Did you hope he stayed?
I thought he was the coaching fascination with him. I never got. Last year, he showed something. So I was, I think he closed half the haters' mouths, or closed half the mouth of all the haters, or whatever you want to say. So
Jamal thinks I'm a hater.
Yeah, I know. I've heard that. I've heard that. He's not that good. It's not hating to call it what he is. He's a marginal 3rd or 4th wide receiver.
He's a decent possession guy. That's about as much as I can say about
But he
him.
also made some bonehead mistakes over the years, and he really never really separated himself in any one part of the game. It's not like his routes were so good that he's a reliable 3rd and 6 guy, on an everyday basis. Here's what I'll say. This is what in the NFL why the reputation of teams and front offices matter, because the Ravens, whether it's well-deserved or not, I'm not here to debate.
Agreed.
The truth is that their reputation as a franchise and an organization is in the top echelon of the league. And that was a shady-ass deal that they did, with the signing Michael Crabtree and that whole connection. But they get almost a full pass. People chuckled and made eye rolls. But if that had been a team like the Dolphins or the Redskins or one of these other teams that have these kind of bad reputations, it would have driven a week of NFL content, skewering that team.
Really
so it's just interesting to see how reputation matters on stuff that everyone does.
And by the way, let's be clear. He's not nearly the first person who's had a contract terminated because of medical reasons. That's not exactly unique, okay? It's not unprecedented. It's happened before. I don't know. Unless Grant files a grievance and all that becomes public, we may never know the truth about him and his ankle. So what's interesting to me is he's become, all of a sudden Redskins fans love him and feel really bad for him. Most of y'all hated him when he was here.
Oh, that's life.
And it's
that's
only after
in
he's
life,
gone
Steve.
that everybody all of a sudden feels sorry for him and wants him back. That I find kind of funny.
You cover all the bases.
I wouldn't mind
feel sorry
having
for
Grant
him and don't want him back.
I wouldn't mind paying him a couple $1 million to come. I wouldn't mind paying him if the Redskins had paid him a couple $1 million on a 1-year contract to have a possession receiver that Jay Gruden seems to love. I would have been fine with that. I would definitely not have been fine with 5 years, $29 million. That's insanity.
Even a 1-year, $5 million
Damn, you guys
deal,
are
which is
harsh.
what he got.
Doesn't it give you pause that he got an offer that big though? Doesn't that make you think, man, there's got to be something I'm not seeing?
I would have been fine with
something
it.
about this guy that people love. That's too different.
Well, see, we don't see practice. We don't see him in practice. Obviously, the coaches love him in practice.
Cue Allen Iverson.
Practice? Well, Allen's a Hall of Famer, of course, but Ryan Grant is not going to ever be in the Hall of Fame. I don't know. I would have been fine with $5 million. So they can if they wanted him and it makes Jay happy. It's not like they couldn't afford a $5 million contract if they wanted.
True. All right, well, we can move on from Grant since we've probably already spent too much time on Ryan Grant. Poor guy. Well, if we don't have any other free agent movements to discuss, and I don't know that we do Redskins-wise.
No
related to
Hankins
the
tracker?
Redskins.
We're not tracking Hankins' movements?
No, this show is not going to freak out over Jonathan Hankins. Let me just say this.
Yeah.
All you guys who have absolutely lost your mind over Jonathan Hankins, please remember that this guy has been available 2 years in a row, and he got cut by the Colts. The sucky, awful Colts. I'm not saying he wouldn't be a benefit to the team. The Redskins couldn't use a defensive tackle. That would be, it would be a bonus to have another run-stopping defensive tackle. But this guy is not the second coming of Darryl Grant, okay? It will be fine, I promise you. The world will keep turning if Jonathan Hankins doesn't become a Redskin, particularly at whatever outrageous number he wanted, which is clearly the hang-up, because that's always the hang-up. Just everybody calm down about Jonathan Hankins. It's neither of you guys follow our Twitter mentions. It's just insane how many Twitter mentions we get about Jonathan Hankins. Just in the comments on our comments section on the blog, those guys talk about Jonathan Hankins like Jesus Christ himself has been reborn. Just remember who Jonathan Hankins is, for God's sakes. He's a decent player. He ain't no Hall of Famer. We will be fine.
We'll be fine without him. Who was the Hankins that we had on this team, by the way? There was a Redskins
Leonard
Hankins in the last
Hankins, wide receiver.
Leonard
That
Hankins.
was no Hankinson. Jesus, guys, who are you guys,
Hankinson.
Hogsteyers or not? Leonard Hankerson.
Oh, come on. Let's be honest. Leonard Hankinson.
Hankerson. Yeah.
Hankerson was not a huge one to remember. That was the dark ages of Redskins fandom, or one of the.
That was only a couple years ago. We've had a lot of dark ages. You got to be more specific than that.
That's true. Good point.
They're like tides
okay.
rather than ages. They come twice a day.
Yeah.
Yeah, the dark time. All right, well, let's talk a little draft then, fellas. We've talked about some free agent movements. There will undoubtedly be more in the coming weeks, but let's talk about the draft and how it's shaping up right now. What are the big position groups that we absolutely 100% must target in the draft at this point?
Well, if you look at the team needs at the start of the offseason, in no particular order, defensive line, left guard, running back, wide receiver, inside linebacker, outside linebacker, corner,
safety, blocking tight end.
Yeah, safety, blocking tight end. We filled some of that already. We filled the inside linebacker need. We don't need starting inside linebackers. With the return of Zach Brown and Mason Foster. It's not to say they won't draft one. The Redskins like drafting linebackers, but they don't need draft starters.
It's not the big priority.
Yeah,
need going
they've
into
got
draft.
Paul Richardson. Paul Richardson is going to be the big starter. I'll get back to Paul Richardson here in a minute because I have things to say about him too. But to answer the question, so we filled inside linebacker. We filled the starting wide receiver need. We've got depth at corner. I don't think they're looking to draft a starting corner. So really, I think where we're looking in the draft, to me, at the top of the draft, in no particular order right now, defensive tackle, running back, left guard in particular. Those three, I think, are the biggest remaining team needs. Now, what I said earlier in a couple shows ago is that I don't know if they're going to sign a left guard in free agency just from a money perspective. Because they're about to give Brandon Scherf a huge extension. Joel Corey, I asked Joel Corey about it.
Joel Corey, friend of the show, contract.
Yeah, about what he thinks Scherf's contract is. Just give me a ballpark. And his response to that was somewhere between Andrew Norwell and what Zach Martin is going to get. Now, Norwell got $13 million a year. So you got to think Scherf is a better player
between
than Norvell.
13 and 20 something.
20 is too high. I think between 13 and maybe 16. So I think maybe 15 million a year for Scherf. So point is, you've got Scherf at say 15 million. You've got Trent at 13 million. You got Morgan Moses at a big contract. So they can't exactly add another $10 million a year guy at guard. Otherwise, they're going to have the most expensive offensive line in history. So I still think they may
not nearly enough production to justify that money.
Yeah. So I think they may yet sign one of these one-year stopgap types to start at left guard and then draft somebody lower. So to me, the big needs at the top of the draft that they're probably going to fill in some order or another are defensive line and running back. That's what I think.
Yeah, I don't see left guard is important. I think you can play some games there and figure something out a little easier than you can at those other two positions. So I think interior defensive linemen and running back are by far at the top of the list. And one thing about Alex Smith that I think people, and I'm not here to debate Alex Smith, all that. Done is done and done. I've actually been an Alex Smith fan for a long time, so yay. He's an easy guy to root for. Yay, Alex Smith. Go team. But he needs a running back. Yes. He is a player that needs legitimate play action. He needs balance. He needs to, it helps him create stuff off schedule. So you cannot Band-Aid running back with Alex Smith as your quarterback. And I don't mean that as a dig on him. It's just a commentary on his game and the kind of offenses he thrives in.
Absolutely. And it's probably, it's to an extent, it's true for anybody. I mean, if your running game is really that bad as ours has historically been the last few seasons, it's going to be a struggle for the rest of the offense for any quarterback. So I absolutely agree. And particularly with Alex Smith's playing style, I think you're totally right. You've got to have a cast of characters around this guy.
I mean, is it any surprise that a running game has been bad? Is anybody so surprised at this?
Of course not.
Yeah, and it's not because of the offensive line. Think about the talent that they've brought in here. They burned a third-round draft pick on Matt Jones, who was a bust from basically day one. They spent a fourth-rounder on Samaje Perine, and shockingly enough, he looked like a fourth-rounder. He's okay.
Right.
He has some potential here and there. He doesn't really look like a franchise back. Samaje Perine is meh to me. That's Samaje. And he's a fourth-rounder. So, the most talented, successful guy they've had in here in a while is Rob Kelly, who was an undrafted free agent out of Tulane. So it's not surprising we haven't had a good running back. It's high time they spend some draft capital on running backs. We can debate. One thing I don't like doing is, people get way too wrapped up, in my opinion, in draft boards. You see, oh my God, the guy is ranked 16th, and we can't possibly draft him at 13, and it's to me all that is just nonsense. It matters to a certain extent. I'm not talking about drafting a guy rated in the third round and the first round, but to me, you get the best guy, and don't worry about what some yutz, on the internet has him ranked at. I think that's ridiculous. So if the big debate running back wise is Darius Geis worth a pick at number 13? I don't know. I don't know how the team rates him. It depends on how the team sees him. Is he going to be overdrafted because of various needs and whatnot? Probably so. So I wouldn't be upset if they drafted Geis at 13, and I don't really care if some of you out there have him ranked at 22. Doesn't really matter to me. What matters to me is 3 years from now is he a successful draft pick. That's what matters to me.
So nobody here is of the Doc Walker school of thought that Chris Thompson can get it done this year, and you don't worry about scooping up a running back. You roll with Thompson. We're not of that mind here. I mean, the dude was cooking until week 5 or whatever it was.
Well, see, we need to get Doc back on the show because Doc also promised to come back on and talk running backs with us before the drafts. And so it's about that time. We need to get Doc back on here and let him just ramble about, running backs. He did say that. He does Doc is a old school football guy, and I think his sort of macro point was, whoever's here is going to have to get it done. Whoever's here is here, and let's just do it. And that's kind of what Doc was saying.
That's fine on August 28th. It's March. This is where you're trying to figure out who's here. So,
Right.
So literally the definition of this time period.
Yeah, exactly. We're not quite at the point of, we got to roll with whoever we got. We're not quite at that point yet. We can make some changes. They
turned up the volume on Chris Thompson last year, who I love. What happened? He spent the second half of the year on injured reserve. That's not, it's not a question of talent. It's ability. It's about his size, his body type, and his relative health. And a guy who even you turn the reps up on him, even, not just up the middle stuff, but you turn up the reps in general on him, and he doesn't finish seasons. So, if you want him on the field and he's a weapon, then you have to be thoughtful about that. You can't lean on him.
I think Chris Thompson's highest and best use is not as an every down franchise back. Right. He's not a three-down back. I think he's most effective when he comes in spurts. Because I think if defenses, I don't think he's good enough and big enough to be a guy who defenses are going to key on first and second down all the time. And I don't think he's big enough to be healthy and run in between the tackles. Chris Thompson is a speed guy. He's more capable than probably we thought when he was drafted, for sure, and I like him, and I'm glad he's on the team. But I don't think he's the guy you want to be a classic feature back. I think a classic feature back is, in the draft, Rashad Penny, perhaps, Saquon Barkley, who we're not going to be able to draft, Darius Geis, Ronald Jones from USC, maybe. He may be more of a receiver. Jones may be, truthfully, the guy who best fits the Jay Gruden offense. But I think one of those guys, the Redskins, one of those four guys I just mentioned, Barkley, Geis, Penny, Jones, they need to make a huge effort to get one of them. That's what I think they need to do some way, somehow in rounds 1 and 2.
I wish tactically, this is an area where I kind of disagree, or I would have done things different, and I'm obviously just some schmo. But this is an area I wish they'd actually attacked in free agency and got like a Carlos Hyde and gotten like a proven number one that you could then, you have Thompson, you let P. Ryan and Fat Rob battle it out. You have a version of that. That's not a bad stable. This is an area I would have gotten, spent a little bit of money, gone out and tacked, and then that lets you draft young defensive talent in the draft, which is really where you make hay, or on the line. And so I think that was a real tactical error that you're even debating this going into the draft, and there isn't a guy signed.
That's fantastic. I love that. Steve and I both really pushed for, high, as much as we can push, quote unquote, for anything on the show. We both really wanted that. A tandem of Carlos Hyde and Thompson would have been gnarly. Something like that would have been excellent.
Or Isaiah Crowell or somebody.
Yeah, somebody.
Pushed for it. Like I texted Dan Snyder that, and I got back who dis is what I got in the response back.
New phone, who dis.
No, but seriously, I loved Hyde. I know a lot of people out there saw him as kind of average, but I look at, when it's running backs, I look at production. The bottom line is Carlos Hyde's produced. It doesn't matter now. They didn't spend money on it. It is what it is. Hyde and Kroll and all these guys. The only one out there who's still out there who I think can be a net positive is Orleans Darkwa with the Giants. I don't think Orleans is the next coming of O.J. Simpson or anything, but I think he's better than anybody we have. And if we sign a guy like that to be the starter, then maybe you can focus more on sort of who's the best player type around for the top of the draft. Because like our Mark Tyler from Hogshaven, who I know, loves Derwin James, for example. Derwin James is a safety, and Adam Traskey reviewed him in the safety draft preview, if you want to read it there. But like Mark thinks Derwin James is the next coming Sean Taylor. I don't really go that far with him. But, if you filled your other holes in free agency, like we signed Carlos Hyde, we, filled the need at left guard somehow, some way, well, then you can afford to take a shot at Derwin James, for example. But if we have a massive hole at running back and we have a defensive line that is stocked with Sean, Chris, and Steve, plus Jonathan Allen, you kind of have to fill the need. And I know people out there are freaking out when you listen to that, and they're going, "Oh my God, BPA, BPA, BPA," which also makes me want to scream. But I think at some point you have to pay attention. It's not to say you should, again, draft third rounders in the first round, but you have to kind of pay attention to roster building at some level. You can't take like a quarterback right now in the first round just because he's there. We don't need a quarterback. We utterly don't need a quarterback in the first round. So I've always fallen on the lines of, yes, take the best player, but it kind of has to be within a subset of positions that we really are desperately needed. When you're on a team like the Redskins, the Patriots, another matter. When you're a team like the Redskins with so many holes, let's fill a hole, for God's sakes. Let's not draft some guy, we don't need to draft a left tackle, for example. That's where I fell out on it. So, if they sign a running back, they do something at defensive tackle, yeah, okay, then take Derwin James. And then if Mark is right and he's Sean Taylor, all the better. Thoughts? Silence. I'll keep babbling. Huh?
Sean, I think you're muted.
We're having time.
I have a tendency to do that. Sorry, guys. No, I was.
You are a professional. Turn your mic on.
You know what? It wasn't even worth saying because all I was really saying was I can't really disagree with anything you say with that. I can't add much to it. I completely agree. There's a point at which in team building, the ratio of best player available to targeted needs changes. But at a team like this, when you got, very specific, obvious needs, yeah, you got to target those. I mean, it couldn't be more clear. You can't just take BPA, when you have tangible, obvious needs. So I think you're completely right.
I'm going to give our front office a bit of a shout out over the last couple of years, and I'm not, whether it was Scott or Bruce or deeper down, whatever, who cares? They have done a better job bringing in talent at the back half of the draft and in undrafted free agency that's filled out the bottom half of the roster better. And that was probably one of the major positives of last season was, now it got to the point of ridiculousness, but the next man up was working on this team through a stretch of just historic injuries. And I have to commend them for that. And I think it's one of the reasons you see them cast off more players and allow marginal players to sign other places and, our trash going to other teams because they've gotten better at being able to get cheap, younger talent to step up and to fill some of those positions and push some of those middle guys out of the team. So the other thing is going to be looking to see through not only the draft, but that week 10 days after where everyone goes into the undrafted free agent orgy time, are they going to improve the team? That's been important for them the last couple of years.
Well, I think Matt Ioannidis is the guy who most exemplifies that, for example. Who would have thought that Matt Ioannidis was going to end up being a mainstay of the defensive line?
A staple of the team.
Yeah, who would have thought that? He was a fifth-round draft pick. You could hit or miss. With a fifth-round draft pick, you kind of hope the guy's going to work out. Maybe he's going to be a solid player. It turns out he's a starter. Like Josh Holsey, back of the draft player. Who would have guessed he could play? Well, it turns out the Redskins guessed he could play, and they were right. So I think you make a good point, Chris. I mean, they've done well. And we've done better just draft-wise generally. We used to miss on everything, and now we're hitting on some. And so they are doing better. They're doing better. I hear you guys out there who are talking about, you need to draft the best player. I mean, I really do get it. I just don't think this team is in a position to completely ignore holes in favor of who your personal draft board says is best. I think if you gave GM's truth serum, what they would say is that their draft board takes both into account. So if the next Lawrence Taylor pops up, for example, well, you kind of have to take the next Lawrence Taylor.
You're going to take him.
Yeah, but all the same, the tiebreaker here is we have a team need here. So, we're going to go with the guy that best fits the hole in the roster. So I think that's probably, truthfully, how teams draft, if you ask me. So there you go.
Yeah, and you know what? I think people probably overthink it. What you just said makes completely perfect common sense. And, people probably overthink it, think themselves out of that, but it makes complete sense. Excuse me. So, with this draft stuff in mind, we had a couple write-ups that Adam, our good friend and colleague Adam Taraski, wrote for us on draft previews. Steve, do you want to talk about that a little bit real quick, or should we go into some of the other things? We're about 10 minutes away from the end of the show. We got rule changes to talk about and some other extracurricular stuff. So, where do you guys want to go? You want to talk about some of these previews, or?
Well, I don't know if we want to get into too specifics at this point about the previews. He's done a really good job. Where we've gotten through, for those of you who haven't paid attention, we started with special teams because, we'll start with small. And we've been through corners, safeties, wide receivers, interior defensive line, quarterbacks, and edge rushers. That's where we've gone so far. We're going to have, I believe it's tight ends, I think, this coming week. And then we'll finish up with the interesting stuff, which is offensive line and running back. But in terms of edge rushers, I do want to mention, because we talked about the needed edge rusher. Clearly Bradley Chubb is the top guy. The Redskins are never going to get him. But if they want to do, he's going to be a top 5 pick. He may be number 2 to the Giants, considering, the Giants are switching to the 3-4. But if you're talking day 1 prospect, possibly first couple rounds, Harold Landry from Boston College. He's not the biggest guy, 6'3", 250, but he's quick. He's the speed guy you want. So there's that. I watched a little bit of the USC Pro Day this week, and Adam mentioned, I'm going to butcher this guy's name, so forgive me.
It's a hard one.
Uchenna Nwosu. Yeah. Forgive me, Mrs. Nwosu, if you're listening to this. But he's another guy, speed guy, 6'2", 250, can come off the edge. What I saw of him on the Pro Day, I was impressed. Adam's impressed with him. And then if you're looking for a day 3 prospect, I can't pretend to know anything about him. I take Adam's word on this. Marquise Haynes from Mississippi. Watch that name. He's undersized, narrow frame. He's only 225 pounds, but he's got explosiveness. So situational pass rusher. So there are a few names with edge rusher.
Awesome. And, folks, you can get these over at thehogstie.com. Adam Trask, he's kind of a draft expert. He was on the show pretty frequently some time ago. Now he mostly contributes in written content, but he's a former player from Virginia Tech. Great guy. Really smart on draft stuff, so make sure you're checking that out on thehogstie.com. Anybody on that list jump out at you in particular, Chris, or are you just kind of like, in a general agreement with these guys?
Yeah, I'm not gonna. Anything I say would only dumb down his commentary by association. So
welcome to my world, Chris. Welcome to my world.
I look forward to making instant judgments on the 15 minutes after the draft cards come in.
Excellent. I'll be right there with you, my friend. All right. Well, then moving on from that stuff, we had a couple other things. So probably the most interesting thing that we had on the agenda today was talking about this proposal for a rule change.
Yes.
There's been a couple, but particularly with the catching rule, right, Steve? And there's no way I'm going to be able to explain the current catching rule, so you got to take this one, man, and explain the rule change.
Well, very few people can explain the catch rule. You can get Hall of Fame wide receivers on the NFL Network who can't explain what a catch is, and that's kind of the point. What is a catch? Because if you give, if you look at things and you're honest with yourself, you just said the Dez Bryant catch in the playoffs was a real catch. Who's the Hall of Famer with the Lions? The Calvin Johnson catch in the end zone was a catch several years ago. This year, the catch at the Pittsburgh New England game should have been a touchdown. And the whole problem I think I and everybody had with the catch rule is that the catch rule in large part had to do with what happens to the player once he hits the ground, which is just absurd to me because I don't really care what happens when the ball hits the ground. So with the proposal that the competition – let me back up. How these rules work, the NFL owners are the ones who decide all this. There is a competition committee made up of influential NFL owners. Dan Snyder's not one of those because he's not a particularly influential owner.
Truth.
He's not on that committee, but it's a committee of influential owners. They propose rule changes, and then the owners at large vote on these rule changes at the NFL meetings, which are about to happen. Okay? So that's why this is going on. So here's the proposal from the competition committee. Recommendations, and I'm reading a chart from Al Riveron, who is in the NFL front office. He's involved in I believe he's a referee, I think. Let me see here. Senior Vice President of Officiating. So that's who the source is for this. Recommendations on the catch rule. 1, control. 2 feet down or another body part. 3, a football move such as, number 1, a third step. Number 2, reaching or extending for the line to gain. Or 3, ability to perform such an act. So those are what qualifies a catch, you're saying? That is the proposal in front of the NFL owners right now. And so the big thing you take from this is that the movement of the ball as it hits the ground has been removed from this, which is a huge win. Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's fantastic. I'm tired of seeing people who have obvious possession who jostle it a teeny little bit and it's not a catch. I mean, it kind of not only do they jostle the spirit of the game. Not only do they jostle a teeny bit, they jostle a teeny bit out of the back of the end zone. when they've had, to me, if a player has the ball in his hand, two hands on the ball's under control, 2 feet on the ground, he hits a catch. I don't, the idea that he hits the ground out of the end zone and the ball moves is just stupid. It's just dumb. So they've taken that out. So the controversial part of the proposal is the sub 3, okay? A football move such as a third step, that's easily seen. Reaching or extending for reaching or extending the ball out, I get it.
For extra yards.
Fine.
Yep.
The ability to perform such an act, what the heck does that mean?
Well, they've got to leave themselves wiggle room, man. They've got to allow themselves to have wiggle room to call it however they want to. That's what that is.
That's the gray area. But just taking the ground out of it is a huge win, and we all ought to celebrate that, provided that the owners do the right thing and approve this or some bastardized version of this. So that's that. There are a bunch of other rules. Most of them are kind of nits and noise. That's the big one. The Redskins proposal always get shot down, but they have made a proposal this year, and that was to add the review of personal fouls as reviewable plays for the instant replay.
That was such a stupid idea.
I think it's a great idea. I think everything on the field ought to be reviewable. I don't think there ought to be a portion of the game that is not reviewable by instant replay. I think 100%.
6-hour football game.
No, I'm not, because I'm not saying give an unlimited number of reviews. I'm saying
just make it any play that people want.
If you want to throw your challenge flag out there, throw it, and we will look at the tape. I don't know why you would hold anything back whatsoever.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think about why they would propose such a thing. Do they think that they've been the victim of a lot of unfair judgment calls made by refs for personal fouls?
Probably.
I mean, it just seems. I'm trying to think of the potential negative that something like that could have, and I don't know how it could make things worse. I just see it having very little effect.
You'd have so much more controversy. You'd have so much more idiotic umpire, field conferences and obvious disagreements as they argue around the circle. I just think it would also bring up the art of the flop. It would be, I don't know, it would need a lot of theatrics.
It's a step closer to the Key and Peele skit when he's doing the pelvic thrusts, and they're like, you can only do 3, and he's like, he does 2. It's kind of getting one step closer to that. I guess I see where you're coming from.
Okay, you're losing me with that one, but I just don't.
I'll send you the videos.
Yeah, please, because
watch some comedy.
I know who Key and Peele are.
I'm not a funny guy. What can I don't. I'm not a comedian. Sue me. I just don't understand. I don't see how the game would be made any slower. The refs already, the on-field umpires already don't make the calls on the refs. That goes to New York. The NFL front offices are the ones who are making the calls. And they're just the ump on the field is just listening, to a radio connection, and they tell him yes or no. So I don't understand why it would make the game any longer. But we're making the show longer based on debating this too much. My point was that was the Redskins input. Another one which I thought, I'm not going to read them all, but another one which I thought was pretty good is to eliminate the requirement that a team who scores a winning touchdown at the end of the regulation game has to kick an extra point. And this comes back to, well, it's just kind of funny because if you think back to the Vikings divisional round playoff game in which the Case Keenum threw that fantastic game-winning touchdown. Well, they had to kick an extra point. They had to get the punter. I forgot even who were the Vikings even playing in that game.
Saints.
Someone help me. Yeah,
Saints.
They had to get. I think the Saints punter came out to line up for the extra point that they had to kick, which is dumb, So I think it's nothing to debate. That's a proposal. I think it's wise. So there you go. So that's rule change. But the big thing to watch is the catch rule for sure.
Which we won't know till about mid-season whether it makes sense or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to see it in action before you can make a judgment on it. That's true. Okay, well, at that, is there anything we missed? Anything you guys want to call out before we let people get back to their weekends?
Real quick, Michael Bennett got charged with a crime.
Oh, yeah, he's a dick. That's right. Let's talk about that.
I don't like Michael Bennett anyway, because of all the anthem stuff. So I wish nothing but the worst on that guy. But anyway, I don't want to get too into legal mumbo jumbo. He got charged under the Texas injury to an elder statute.
That's not a good look.
No, it's
not
a good look.
You don't want to beat up elders. I mean,
there's not a video that has been released to the public, at least right now. So we'll see. But apparently, what happened was he was trying to come onto the field after the Super Bowl, and this elderly woman who is in a wheelchair was the security guard at one particular tunnel, and she said no, and he ran right past her and harmed her at some level or another. Now,
fantastic.
So it can be up to a second-degree felony, unless he's really, really injured. So he's looking at substantial jail time if he actually was dumb enough to go to trial. I will say this, for those of you who think this is a racial thing and this is like a yeehaw Trump thing, I personally know the Harris County District Attorney, okay?
But what does this have to do with Trump in any way?
Well, because Michael Bennett's a socially active player.
Yeah,
so
there's like Robert Liddell with Black Sports Online has put this out there, and this is just Texas's punishment against Michael Bennett. I personally know my office was 5 feet from her office a few years ago. I know her on a personal level. She is not that type. She's a Democrat. She's not some sort of yeehaw Texas person at all. If she charged Michael Bennett with a crime, that means they have evidence to suspect that he committed a crime.
That it happened.
There are people like that in Texas. The Harris County DA is not that type of person at all. That's not.
I would
what this
imagine
is.
that it would be captured on video or something.
Yeah, you would assume there's a video. She is not the type of person that would just throw a charge out there just as red meat to the Yeehaw Texas crowd. That's just not what this is. I don't care what Robert Liddell says. He doesn't know. He's not here. I am here, and I do know her, and that's not what this is. So we'll see what happens.
No, we'll keep our eye on it. Yeah, that's not a good look. Something you don't want to be doing in your life, and there's just no reason for it.
Beating up an elder is not something you want to put on the resume.
What a bonehead.
And
man.
a disabled, someone in a wheelchair. Well, and of course,
that's just the icing on the shit sandwich right there.
I mean, you have to ask, why is a disabled elderly person a security guard? But that's another question entirely.
Separate issue.
Yeah.
That ship sailed.
Yeah, she was there, and that was the bottom line.
Security loosely defined.
Yeah, exactly. All right, cool. Well, fair enough. We'll cut it off there, folks. Thanks for being with us today. Thanks, obviously, for Chris being on the show. We'll obviously have him more back, but you can always catch him on It's Just Business and at thehogstite.com. So make sure you're doing that, folks.
Thanks for having me. It's always fun chat skins here on the mothership.
Oh, of course, man. We got to talk Redskins some more. Anything else? Any final thoughts, Steve? You look like you had something on your mind.
No, that was it. I just had to get my Michael Bennett rant out.
Fair enough. All right, folks. Well, we love you. We'll see you next time right here on the Hogstye. Take care.
Amen, kids.